It was just after 6 in the evening, but the January sky over Detroit, Michigan, had already surrendered to darkness. Wind screamed between buildings, cutting like razors through the streets. The temperature hovered at 14 degrees. Ice glazed every surface, glittering under the harsh glow of street lamps. But Veronica Morgan walked on. Her natural hair, usually worn in a proud crown, was pulled back tight in a practical bun beneath a knit cap that had seen better winters. Her olive parka, threadbare, zipper broken months ago, flapped open with each gust despite the safety pins holding it closed. Layers beneath, a hoodie, 2 sweaters, none of them enough. In her arms, bundled against her chest in a thin purple blanket, was her 8-month-old daughter, Kendra. Veronica's worn boots scraped against ice-slicked concrete. No car, sold 4 months ago. No bus fare, that went to diapers. No family to call, daddy's gone, mama's gone, and Jamal's been gone even longer. Just a mother walking through bitter cold, chasing survival. Kendra whimpered, her small brown fingers clutching at the blanket's frayed edge. Almost there, baby girl, Veronica murmured, bending her head low, her breath making small clouds in the frozen air. Mama's got you. Just hold on. The automatic doors of Savamart opened with a mechanical groan, releasing a wave of warm air that made Veronica's eyes burn and water. She grabbed a cart, one will squeak persistently, and gently settled Kendra in the child's seat, tucking the purple blanket around her more securely. We're just getting what we need, she whispered, smoothing her daughter's soft curls. She moved deliberately through the fluorescent-lit aisles. Store-brand rice, day-old bread from the discount rack, eggs, generic cereal. Her eyes scanned every price tag like she was reading sheet music, calculating, adjusting, recalculating. $28. That was everything she had until Friday, and Friday was 4 days away. Then she reached the baby food aisle. Her heart dropped into her stomach. There they were, the organic hypoallergenic pouches, the only kind that didn't trigger Kendra's severe allergies. The only thing that didn't make her daughter's delicate skin erupt in angry welts and rashes. The only thing Kendra could safely eat. Price, $39.99. Nearly $12 beyond her reach. $12 that might as well have been $12,000. She stared at the pouches. Her mind raced, frantic. What if I put back the rice? The bread? The eggs? Even if I returned everything, it still wouldn't be enough. What if I asked them to hold it? Come back Friday? But Friday Kendra needs to eat today, tomorrow, the next day. Her hand trembled as she reached forward. Heart hammering, she grabbed the container and placed it gently in the cart anyway. Maybe God would work a miracle. Maybe she'd counted wrong. Maybe something. At the checkout, Veronica lifted each item carefully onto the conveyor belt. The cashier, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes working a double shift, scanned methodically without looking up. $47.83. Veronica's hands shook as she opened her wallet, spreading out every crumpled bill, counting each coin twice. I only have $28, she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the store's muzak. I'll have to put the baby food back. The cashier reached across without a word and slid the pouches off the counter. A woman in line behind Veronica clicked her tongue. Some people, she muttered to her companion. Heat flooded Veronica's face. She couldn't look up, couldn't breathe. In the cart, Kendra began to fuss, sensing her mother's distress, tiny face scrunching toward a cry. Veronica reached out instinctively, her warm brown eyes, exhausted but not defeated, locked on her daughter's face. She stroked Kendra's soft cheek with one gentle finger. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice breaking just slightly. Mama's got you. It's okay. 20 feet away, near the coffee counter, Gary Briggs stood frozen. He wore a charcoal wool coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent, a perfectly tied gray cashmere scarf, Italian leather gloves. His sharp features were arranged in the carefully neutral expression he'd perfected over 3 years of grief. Controlled, professional, untouchable. Cold blue eyes that rarely showed warmth watched the scene at the checkout unfold like a film playing on a screen he couldn't look away from. His 6-year-old daughter Tessa stood beside him, her small hand tucked into his. She watched too, her young face confused, troubled. Daddy, Tessa whispered, tugging at his coat sleeve. Why is that baby crying? Gary Briggs, CEO, widower, man who lived by quarterly reports and performance metrics, man who hadn't truly felt anything since the night Natalie's car spun out on black ice, felt something crack deep inside his chest. Something he'd thought was frozen solid. Something he'd thought was gone forever. I don't know, sweetheart, he heard himself say. But that wasn't true. He knew exactly why. Hello everyone, before we continue today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never get to miss our channel new stories. It is quick, free, and best way to support us in bringing more interesting stories. Your support means the world to us and motivate us to create more good stories. Tell us where you are watching from, your country, city, so we can know how far our stories goes. Thank you. Let's begin the story. Gary Briggs had built his fortune on calculated decisions, on risk assessments and projected outcomes, on never acting on impulse. But standing in Savamart with his daughter's hand in his, watching that young mother whisper comfort to her crying baby, something shifted in him that had nothing to do with logic. "Come on, Tessa," he heard himself say. He moved through the aisles with purpose he hadn't felt in 3 years. The organic hypoallergenic pouches, he grabbed 2 containers. His eyes caught a display of infant socks, thick and warm. He added 3 pairs. A rotisserie chicken, still hot. Fresh rolls. At checkout, he paid without counting, didn't wait for the change the cashier tried to hand him. "Sir, you're..." "Keep it," he said, already moving toward the exit. The wind outside hit, like a physical blow. Gary pulled Tessa closer, scanning the parking lot. There, at the bus shelter across the street, barely visible through the swirling snow, a figure hunched against the cold, purple blanket clutched to her chest. His shoes, Italian leather, completely impractical, slipped on ice as he crossed. He slowed as he approached, suddenly aware of how he must look. Expensive coat. White man. Late evening. A woman alone with a baby. He saw Veronica tense before she even turned. Saw her arms tighten protectively around Kendra. Tears had frozen in tracks down her cheeks. "Excuse me," Gary said softly, stopping several feet away. Veronica turned, her body angled defensively, brown eyes wary and exhausted. "Yes." Gary held out the bag, his voice gentle. "I think you dropped this." She looked at the bag, then at him, her jaw setting. "That's not mine." "It is now. I don't take handouts." Her voice was quiet but firm, dignity wrapped around her like armor. Gary glanced at Kendra, whose tiny fist had emerged from the blanket, clutching at her mother's coat. "It's not a handout. It's just..." He searched for words. One parent helping another. Behind his coat, Tessa peeked out, her wide eyes fixed on the baby. "Your baby is really pretty," she said, her voice small and shy. "What's her name?" Something flickered across Veronica's face. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. She looked down at Kendra, then back at Tessa. "Kendra. It means grace." Tessa's face lit up with a smile. "That's a beautiful name." "I'm Tessa." "That's beautiful too," Veronica said quietly, and Gary saw the first crack in her armor. A gust of wind howled through the shelter. Veronica shivered so violently that Kendra whimpered against her chest. Gary saw layers that weren't enough, a broken zipper, boots with holes letting in slush. "Please," he said, "let me drive you home. It's too cold out here." Veronica's eyes met his, calculating, weighing. Every warning her father had ever given her echoed in her mind, about being a black woman, about trusting strangers, about men who offered help that came with prices. But she looked at Tessa's innocent face, pink-cheeked and open. At Gary's eyes, sad eyes, she realized, not threatening ones. Eyes that knew grief. And Kendra was shivering now too. "Just to the bus line on Jefferson," Veronica said finally, her voice barely audible over the wind. Gary nodded, relief washing through him. "Okay. Just to Jefferson." Chapter 2. Gary's Mercedes felt obscene navigating these streets. Snow piled in drifts against abandoned storefronts, broken streetlights casting pools of darkness between the working ones. Veronica directed him with quiet precision, left on Werner, right at the bodega with the barred windows, third building on the left. The apartment building leaned slightly, exhausted brick and peeling paint. But Veronica climbed out with her head high, Kendra bundled against her chest. "I know it's not much," she said, meeting his eyes, "but it's safe." 3 flights of narrow stairs, the railing loose in places. Gary carried the groceries while Tessa held tight to his coat. At the top, Veronica unlocked 2 deadbolts and a chain. Inside was a studio apartment no bigger than Gary's master closet. Tiny but so clean it gleamed. A curtain fashioned from bedsheets divided the sleeping area. Second-hand furniture, a love seat with mismatched cushions, a card table with 2 folding chairs, a rug worn thin but carefully placed. Everything arranged with intention, with care. But what stopped Gary mid-step was the wall. Shadow boxes lined one section, professional and precise. Metals gleaming against dark velvet. A photograph in dress blues. A handsome black man with Veronica's eyes, strong features, proud bearing. Detroit Fire Department insignia. More frames. News clippings yellowed at the edges, citations, a folded American flag. Gary moved closer, unable to stop himself. Firefighter saves family during Katrina relief. One headline read. New Orleans, September 2005. Citations for valor, for courage under fire. That's my father, Veronica said quietly, removing Kendra's coat with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Marcus Morgan. He went to New Orleans after Katrina. Volunteer crew from Detroit. She paused, her voice softening. Saved a lot of people down there. He died when a building collapsed during a rescue. Never made it home. Gary stood frozen, staring at the date. New Orleans. September 2005. Something stirred in his memory, dark and heavy, but he couldn't quite. Daddy, look. Tessa had settled on a blanket with Kendra, making exaggerated faces. Kendra's giggle filled the small space like music. Veronica moved to a hot plate, filling a kettle. She pulled out one tea bag. Gary could see it had been used before, and split it carefully into 2 mugs. I was in nursing school at Wayne State, she said, pouring water. Second year when I got pregnant. Jamal, Kendra's father, he left before she was born. My dad had just died, and without him. She handed Gary a mug. Lost my scholarship. Tried to keep going, but between work and Kendra and no family to help, I just couldn't hold on. She sat on the love seat, suddenly looking very young and very tired. Now I work 3 part-time jobs. Cashier at a gas station, overnight cleaning crew at an office building, weekend catering when I can get it. Gary looked around. Toys made from cardboard boxes, elaborate and creative. Curtains sewn from old sheets. A shelf of library books, spines carefully protected. Photos everywhere. Kendra's first smile, her first time sitting up, moments captured and treasured. His own house, 12 rooms and 6,000 square feet, had bare walls and silence. You've built something real here, he heard himself say. Veronica caught him staring. What? Just, it's real. It's alive. On the blanket, Tessa looked up, her face glowing. Daddy, can we visit Kendra again? The Bloomfield Hills mansion felt colder than the January wind outside. Gary carried Tessa up the curved staircase, her small body limp with sleep against his shoulder. Her bedroom was larger than Veronica's entire apartment. Princess canopy bed, walls painted soft lavender, toys she rarely played with arranged on custom shelving. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stood for a moment watching her breathe. Safe. Warm. Wanting for nothing material, missing everything that mattered. Downstairs, he poured 2 fingers of bourbon into crystal he'd received as a wedding gift. Natalie had chosen the pattern. He stood at the window overlooking the dark grounds, the glass warming in his hand untouched. Marcus Morgan's face wouldn't leave his mind. Those dates on the news clippings. New Orleans. September 2005. His brother Ryan had been there. Gary set down the glass and walked to his study, movements mechanical. The storage box sat on the top shelf, untouched for years, covered in dust. Ryan's belongings from his National Guard deployment during Katrina relief. Gary had kept them after the funeral 5 years ago. Cancer, too young, too fast. Inside, letters, photographs, a leather journal worn soft at the edges. Gary's hands moved without conscious thought, flipping pages. Ryan's neat handwriting chronicled days of chaos, devastation, small moments of hope. And then September 15th, 2005. Today I almost died. Gary's breath caught. Our unit was checking damaged buildings in the 9th Ward. I went into a house looking for survivors. The whole thing started coming down, ceiling, walls, everything. I was pinned under debris, couldn't breathe, water rising fast. Thought that was it. But then this firefighter came out of nowhere, Detroit Fire, on loan for the relief effort. Lieutenant Marcus Morgan. He dug me out with his bare hands, pulled me free just before the whole structure collapsed. Spent 2 hours afterward making sure I was okay, wouldn't leave until the medics cleared me. I asked him why he risked his life for a stranger. He looked at me like it was the strangest question. Because that's what we do, he said. We show up. We help. No matter what. 2 days later, I heard he died pulling a family from another collapse. Same situation, building came down on top of him. They got the family out. He didn't make it. I owe that man my life. I'll never forget him. Clipped to the journal entry was a photograph, edges creased from being carried in Ryan's wallet. 2 men covered in mud and exhaustion, arms around each other's shoulders. Ryan, younger and grinning despite the dirt. And beside him, the same face from Veronica's wall. Lieutenant Marcus Morgan in his Detroit Fire jacket, strong features, Veronica's eyes. Gary's hands shook. The journal fell to the desk. 20 years ago, this man had saved his brother. Given Ryan 5 more years of life, time to fall in love, to laugh, to live. And now Marcus Morgan's daughter was struggling alone, working 3 jobs, unable to feed her baby, trying to hold on to dignity in a studio apartment with second-hand furniture. The cosmic symmetry felt too deliberate to be coincidence. Gary looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he spoke to the empty room, to ghosts, to fate. I can't bring you back, but I can make sure your daughter has the chance you never got to give her. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands, Veronica working, sleeping in fragments, surviving. She'd seen Gary and Tessa once more when they'd brought more groceries, but he'd been quiet, distant, and hadn't stayed long. She told herself not to expect more. Rich white men didn't become friends with struggling black single mothers. That wasn't how the world worked. She was folding laundry in her apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, Kendra napping in the makeshift nursery area behind the curtain, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button. Bill collectors, spam. Nothing good came from unknown numbers. But something made her answer. Hello? Is this Veronica Morgan? Yes. This is Sandra Williams from the Detroit First Responder Family Foundation. I believe you applied for our assistance program about 6 months ago. Veronica's heart lurched. She'd applied to everything, foundations, scholarships, assistance programs, throwing desperate prayers into the void, hoping something would catch. She'd forgotten half of them. Yes, I did. We'd like to meet with you. We have a new initiative that might be a perfect fit. Would tomorrow work? The next day, Veronica took 2 buses downtown, Kendra bundled against her chest. The office building was glass and steel, gleaming in winter sun. Inside, a warm black woman in her 50s with silver-streaked locks greeted her with a genuine smile. Veronica? I'm Sandra. Come, let's talk. They sat in a bright conference room overlooking the Detroit River. Sandra poured water into real glasses, offered crackers. Veronica was too nervous to eat. We've received a major donation, Sandra began. It's specifically designated to support families of first responders who died in the line of duty. It's called the Morgan Hope Foundation. Veronica froze, the glass halfway to her lips. Morgan? Sandra's smile deepened. The donor requested it be named for Lieutenant Marcus Morgan, Detroit Fire Department. Your father. Tears sprang to Veronica's eyes before she could stop them. I don't understand. The donor lost a family member who was saved by your father during Katrina. He wanted to honor that legacy by helping you build your future. Sandra slid a folder across the table. It covers full tuition for nursing school at Wayne State, living expenses for you and Kendra, professional childcare, and a paid internship position here at the foundation. Veronica couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Behind the tears, Kendra cooed softly, oblivious to the moment shifting around them. Sandra continued gently. You'd help other families like yours, sons and daughters of first responders who've sacrificed everything. You'd be the living proof of what we're trying to do. Honor sacrifice by investing in futures. Who? Veronica's voice cracked. Who set this up? Sandra shook her head. He requested complete anonymity. All I can tell you is that your father saved his brother's life 20 years ago, and he never forgot. Veronica pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. 20 years. Her father had been gone 20 years, and still his courage was reaching forward, lifting her up, refusing to let his daughter fall. Does this mean? She couldn't finish. It means you're going back to school, Sandra said softly. It means you get to be the nurse your father always knew you'd be. 6 months transformed everything. Veronica stood outside the Detroit Historical Museum in a borrowed navy dress that fit almost perfectly, Kendra bright in yellow, her brown curls adorned with tiny bows. The building rose before them, limestone and dignity, and Veronica's hands shook as she climbed the steps. Inside, the room filled with voices, first responder families, community leaders, people in suits that cost more than her monthly rent. Veronica held Kendra closer, suddenly aware of every borrowed thread, every carefully hidden seam. Then she saw him. Gary Briggs stood near the windows in a tailored charcoal suit that made him look like he'd stepped from a magazine. Tessa beside him wore pink, her hair in careful braids. And when Tessa spotted them, her face transformed. Miss Veronica, Kendra. The little girl broke free, running across the polished floor. Veronica caught her in a hug, tears already burning her eyes. Tessa's small arms wrapped tight around her waist. "I missed you so much," Tessa whispered. Kendra reached immediately for Tessa, babbling happily, tiny hands grasping. The girls hadn't seen each other since that frozen night, but the connection remained. Instant, pure, uncomplicated by the adult world. Gary approached slowly. His cold blue eyes weren't cold anymore. They met Veronica's across the space between them, and no words were needed. She knew. She knew it was him. Knew it had always been him. He gave a small nod. She mouthed, "Thank you." His throat worked. He nodded again. When Sandra called Veronica to speak, she took a steadying breath and walked to the podium, Kendra balanced on her hip. The room quieted. "My name is Veronica Morgan. I'm honored to be here as the first recipient of the foundation named for my father, Lieutenant Marcus Morgan." Her voice wavered, then strengthened. "My father taught me that service means showing up when it's hard. It means helping even when you get nothing back. It means seeing people as human beings, not statistics or stereotypes." She looked directly at Gary. His eyes glistened. "This foundation didn't just give me money. It reminded me that my father's sacrifice still matters. That his legacy didn't die in New Orleans 20 years ago. It lives in every family we help, every child who gets a chance because someone chose to honor the past by investing in the future." The room erupted in applause. Gary stood with the rest, but his eyes never left her face. But in the back, Patricia Hendricks watched with narrowed eyes. She'd known Gary since business school, had quietly hoped for more between them after Natalie's death. And she'd seen how he looked at Veronica tonight, not like a donor observing a recipient, but like a man seeing sunrise after endless winter. She didn't like it. As the evening continued, Patricia moved through the crowd with surgical precision, planting seeds. Interesting that the first grant goes to someone Gary happened to meet personally. I wonder if there's more to this relationship than philanthropy. You have to admit, the optics are complicated. A white CEO and a black single mother. The words slipped into ears, found purchase in minds, began their insidious work. The conference room felt suffocating despite its size. Board members sat in a tense semicircle around the long mahogany table, eyes flickering between faces, avoiding direct contact. Veronica sat at one end, hands clenched white-knuckled in her lap, the borrowed navy dress suddenly feeling like costume. Gary sat near the window, jaw so tight a muscle jumped beneath his skin. Patricia Hendricks stood at the head of the table, perfectly composed in cream silk, her voice measured and reasonable. "I want to be clear, this isn't personal. It's about ethics and accountability." She addressed the board as if Veronica weren't in the room. Mr. Briggs established this foundation and had direct contact with Ms. Morgan before she was selected as the first recipient. Several donors have expressed concern about the selection process. Questions about whether this was truly merit-based or if other factors influenced the decision. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Thomas Chun, another board member, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Patricia, what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we need to ensure this foundation maintains credibility. There are perceptions that need to be addressed." "Perceptions about what?" Veronica's voice cut through like a blade. She stood slowly, deliberately. "Say what you really mean." Patricia's lips thinned. "Ms. Morgan, no one is questioning your circumstances. But you're questioning my worthiness. You're questioning whether I earned this." Veronica's voice shook, but didn't break. "Let me ask you something, Ms. Hendricks. If I were white, would we be having this meeting?" The room went completely silent. "Because I don't think we would. I think you'd call it a beautiful story and move on. But because I'm a black woman who needed help, suddenly there must be something inappropriate going on. Suddenly my father's sacrifice isn't enough. Suddenly I'm suspect." Gary stood abruptly, chair scraping. "That's enough." He pulled a worn leather journal from his briefcase, walked to the center of the room. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "This is my brother Ryan's journal from Hurricane Katrina. September 15th, 2005. He began reading, his voice steady and clear. The collapse. The rising water. Marcus Morgan appearing like an angel. The rescue. Those words. Because that's what we do. We show up. We help. No matter what." His voice caught. "Lieutenant Morgan died 2 days later, saving another family. My brother lived 5 more years because of him. Got to fall in love. Got to laugh. Got to live." He held up the journal, his cold blue eyes blazing now. "I didn't know who Veronica was when I first saw her in that grocery store. I just saw a mother struggling to feed her baby. Later, I saw her father's picture on her wall. I did research. I found this. He shook the journal. I created this foundation because I could never repay the man who saved my brother. But I could honor him by giving his daughter the chance she deserves. Veronica stood beside him, close enough their shoulders almost touched. My father didn't pull your brother from that building expecting a reward 20 years later, she said, her voice ringing clear and strong. He did it because it was right. I didn't apply to this foundation knowing any connection. I did it because I needed help and I wasn't ashamed to ask for it. She looked directly at Patricia. This isn't a favor. This isn't charity. This is what happens when people choose to see each other as human beings instead of colors or classes. When they choose to honor sacrifice by creating opportunity. Her chin lifted. If that makes you uncomfortable, Ms. Hendricks, that's your problem, not mine. The board chair, Dr. Angela Washington, an older black woman who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying weight. I think we owe Ms. Morgan and Mr. Briggs an apology. And Patricia, I think you need to examine why you felt the need to question this so publicly. Patricia gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements, face flushed. She left without another word, heels clicking on marble like gunshots. Gary and Veronica shared a long look, respect, admiration, and something deeper growing in the space between them. 2 years later, morning sunlight poured through the large windows of a renovated Victorian house in Palmer Woods, turning everything golden. Veronica stood at the kitchen counter making pancakes, wearing the navy scrubs that still felt surreal. She was finishing her final nursing rotation at Detroit Receiving Hospital, 3 weeks from graduation. Gary walked in with 2 mugs of coffee, hair still damp from the shower, and stole a pancake straight from the stack. You have clinicals today? He asked, kissing her temple. Yeah, pediatrics. Then foundation board meeting tonight. She grinned, flipping another pancake. Executive director life. Look at you, running the world. From the backyard came a shriek of laughter. Mama. Mama V. Come see. Veronica's heart swelled the way it did every time. Tessa had started calling her Mama V about a year ago. Her own idea, her own choice, and it never stopped feeling like a gift. She ran outside, Gary following with his coffee. In the snow-covered yard, Tessa and Kendra, nearly 3 now, sturdy and fearless, were building a snowman together. Tessa, at 8, carefully positioned a carrot nose while Kendra clapped her mittened hands with delight. Look how good we made him, Tessa said proudly. He's perfect, Veronica said, crouching down to their level. Best snowman I've ever seen. Gary emerged with 2 small mugs of hot chocolate, marshmallows melting on top. Kendra reached up with both hands. Thank you, Daddy. The first time she'd called him that, 6 months ago, Gary had to step away and cry in the bathroom for 10 minutes. Even now, his eyes glistened as he handed her the mug. You're welcome, baby girl. The family had blended naturally, organically, like it was always meant to be this way. 2 girls who needed mothers. 1 woman who needed to be seen. 1 man who needed to feel again. They'd found each other in a frozen grocery store and built something neither could have imagined. Inside, the walls told their story in photographs. Gary and Veronica on their wedding day at historic Fort Wayne, the Detroit River behind them. Tessa and Kendra as flower girls, matching purple dresses. Marcus Morgan's portrait in the place of honor above the mantel, his medals in their shadow boxes flanking it. Family photos from the Morgan Hope Foundation's 2nd annual gala, where 50 families had celebrated new beginnings. The foundation had grown beyond what Gary had imagined. Veronica ran programming while finishing her degree, creating mentorship circles and support networks. Gary had scaled back his CEO role, let others handle quarterly reports, chose presence over performance metrics. In the kitchen, he wrapped his arms around her waist from behind as she finished the last pancake. You know what Marcus would think of all this? He murmured against her hair. Veronica leaned back into him. What? He'd say, that's what we do. We show up. Yeah, she whispered. He would. Outside, their daughters laughed, building something beautiful from snow and hope. Saturday afternoon at Palmer Park, one of Detroit's hidden gems, felt like stepping into a painting. Autumn had set the trees ablaze, gold and crimson and burnt orange against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The family walked the winding trails, fallen leaves crunching under their feet. Veronica held Kendra's hand, the little girl skipping every few steps. Gary held Tessa's, pointing out squirrels gathering acorns for winter. They looked like any family enjoying the afternoon, laughter and warmth and the comfortable silence of people who belonged together. Halfway around the lake, Tessa stopped walking. She looked up at Veronica with an expression far too serious for 8 years old. Mama V. Yes, sweetheart? I wish I knew you when I was little. When my first mommy died. The words hit like a fist to the chest. Veronica's throat closed. She knelt down on the path, eye level with Tessa, leaves scattering around them. Tell me about her, Veronica said softly. Tessa's face lit up. She was really nice. She read me stories every night, all the princess ones. And she made the best grilled cheese, with butter on both sides so it got really crispy. Her smile wobbled slightly. But you know what? What, baby? I think she would like you. And I think she'd be happy that you love us. Veronica pulled her close, burying her face in Tessa's hair. I do love you. So much. Kendra tugged at Veronica's coat with both hands. Love Tessa too. Tessa laughed through her own tears and bent down to hug Kendra. I love you too, little sister. Gary watched them, his throat working. The man who'd stood in a grocery store 2 years ago with eyes like winter, cold, controlled, dead inside, no longer existed. He wrapped his arms around all three of them, pulling them into a circle on the leaf-covered path. You know what your grandfather told my brother? He said to Kendra, his voice rough. He said, we show up. We help. No matter what. He looked at Veronica, really looked at her, the way he did on their wedding day. You showed me how to show up again. For Tessa. For myself. For all of it. I was alive, but I wasn't living. Veronica leaned into him, one arm around each girl. We showed up for each other. They stood there in the golden afternoon light, a white CEO and a black nurse, 2 little girls who saw no color, only love, only family, framed by Detroit's autumn beauty. Around them, leaves fell like blessings, covering the path they'd walked together and the path still ahead. A jogger passed, smiled at them. Beautiful family. Yes, Gary said, his voice full. Yes, we are. Tessa reached up and took both her parents' hands. Kendra copied her, small fingers wrapping tight. Come on, Tessa said. Let's go home. And they did, together, the way families do. The way they always would. Veronica sat in the foundation office on a Thursday afternoon, still in her nursing scrubs from the morning shift at Detroit Receiving. Applications spread across her desk, each one a story, a struggle, a family that needed to know they mattered. She interviewed a young Latina woman named Maria, widow of a firefighter who'd died in a house fire 6 months earlier. 2 kids, eviction notice, barely holding on. Veronica saw herself in Maria's exhausted eyes, in the way she held her dignity like armor. You're going to be okay, Veronica said, sliding the acceptance letter across the desk. We're going to help you. Your husband's sacrifice matters. You matter. Maria's face crumpled with relief, and Veronica reached across to hold her hand, remembering a snowy night and a stranger's kindness that had changed everything. Across town, Gary picked up both girls from school, Tessa from 2nd grade, Kendra from preschool. His reputation at Briggs Capital as the icy CEO had become a running joke. His assistant had laughed last week. You're about as icy as a golden retriever. They stopped for ice cream despite it being October. Kendra got chocolate all over her face. Tessa told elaborate stories about recess drama. Gary listened to every word like it was the most important thing in the world. Because it was. Dinner around their kitchen table was chaos in the best way. Tessa helped Kendra practice her ABCs between bites of chicken. Laughter and spilled juice, and Gary trying to enforce his no dessert until you eat your vegetables rule that Veronica deliberately undermined by sneaking cookies when he wasn't looking. I saw that, he said without turning around. Saw what? Veronica asked innocently, while Kendra giggled behind her napkin. Bedtime was the girls' favorite part. They shared a room now. Their choice, made 6 months ago when Tessa had climbed into Kendra's bed during a thunderstorm and never wanted to sleep apart again. Twin beds with a starlight projector between them, casting constellations across the ceiling. Veronica read them the snowy day, while Gary leaned in the doorway watching. Tessa fell asleep mid-sentence, mouth slightly open. Kendra whispered, "Night-night, Mama." "Night-night, Daddy," before her eyes drifted closed. They stood there for a moment, watching their daughters breathe. Outside on the porch, Gary and Veronica sat on the swing wrapped in a thick blanket, the October night crisp and clear. Late fireflies danced in the yard, holding on to summer's last moments. Your father would be proud, Gary said quietly. Veronica leaned her head on his shoulder. He'd be proud of both of us. We honored him, not just with a foundation, but with how we live. How we show up for each other, for the girls, for the families who need us. Gary kissed the top of her head. We show up. No matter what, she finished. Inside, warmth and light spilled from every window. Downtown, the foundation building glowed with purpose, 50 families finding hope where there had been none. And in grocery stores across Detroit, mothers were shopping, calculating, surviving, some of them about to receive calls that would change everything. Because someone had chosen to see them. Someone had chosen to show up. Sometimes one moment of truly seeing another person, really seeing them, not as a statistic or a stereotype, but as a human being worthy of dignity, changes everything. Not because of obligation or guilt, but because someone chose to help. To honor the past by building the future. To cross every line that tries to divide us and say, you matter. Your struggle matters. Your father's sacrifice matters. Love isn't colorblind. It's color brave. It's choosing each other across race and class and grief. It's building a family from broken pieces. It's showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's legacy. That's hope. That's what happens when we choose to see each other and refuse to look away. I hope you enjoyed the story. I have a favor to ask. Some of you just watch. I will really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. It is free, and this will encourage us to do more.